Typically, construction cycles are in line with economic cycles. Domestic growth drives construction growth. It's cyclical. What makes this one unique is the fact that trade is driving construction activity over the next 10 years, and it's moving Canada into a whole new realm in terms of world rankings. So historically, Canada has been the 9th largest construction market in the world, maybe 10th. Over the next 10 years, Oxford Economics and PricewaterhouseCoopers did a study and said that Canada is going to move into the top 5, potentially the 4th largest construction economy, and that's all being based and driven on resources. So the world right now is being driven by emerging nations. It will continue to be driven by emerging nations in terms of growth. Those nations require a tremendous amount of resources, precious metals, oil, gas, and that's what Canada's poised to deliver to the rest of the world. What that means for construction is tremendous investment in very rural areas in order to get the metals out of the ground, and it requires a whole new way of thinking in terms of how we move people, how we view construction costs, what the reciprocal economic activity will be, because it's not just about building a large multi-billion-dollar mine in northern British Columbia, northern Saskatchewan, Ontario, Quebec. What it means is you also need to put a town close to it to house the people to be able to work the mine and work the facility. And a good example of that is I was recently talking to somebody where they said in Ontario, they anticipate that in northern Ontario, to accommodate the Ring of Fire, which is a huge, vast deposit of precious metals, a town of 200,000 people will emerge over the next 10 years in order to supply the workforce. That's an awful lot of construction activity and infrastructure. Infrastructure renewal is another big deal. I mean, I know some governments are staying true to their commitment because they have the economic capacity to do it. For example, Alberta, to infrastructure renewal and expansion. Other provinces are challenged, like Ontario, with the Drummond Report being released and Ontario having to back off some of the commitments they made on infrastructure. From our standpoint and some of the research we did using some of StatsCan's work, pretty much every element of our infrastructure is aged. So notwithstanding the fact that Canada is a growing nation and we have cities that are growing, we need to renew our infrastructure. We need to have better infrastructure, expanded infrastructure to be able to house the people, to be able to move freely and move goods so we can stay competitive in the world. But what's more important is the fact that we have more people migrating to these cities. So for example, Toronto, Vancouver, and Montreal are very fast-growing cities, especially Toronto. 200,000 people migrate to Toronto a year. You have aged infrastructure that needs to be updated, but you have demands for new infrastructure and expanded infrastructure. I think that's a key message. Now, I don't know if governments can avoid it. A lot of questions yesterday about, how are they going to fund it? I think there's going to be a lot of insight into that over the next 10 years, but Canada needs to upgrade its infrastructure. It needs to expand its infrastructure. It needs to renew its infrastructure in order to compete. Manufacturing in Canada has historically been a huge employer, massive industry. It still is, but manufacturing hasn't really positively created jobs for a long time. I mean, we've had a long period of time where manufacturing has lost a lot of work to, and this is well documented, to Southeast Asia. It's an industry in transformation. And this is especially impacting Ontario because it's a huge manufacturing base, including Quebec. But what's happening is you have manufacturing, the size of employment, people employed in manufacturing going down, while you have construction as a growth industry. And to the point where construction will outemploy manufacturing, we think, over the next 5 years. And that's significant because manufacturing has often got a lot of political attention because it's an important employer in the Canadian economy, but construction will outemploy manufacturing at this rate probably over the next 5 years.